Welcome back, scholars, to our Digital Academy. I am Professor Spark. Whether we are turning the pages of a timeless novel, our mission remains the same. Will today's sweep us into the concert hall? Let's find out together.
All right, let's just dive right into this and demystify Marcel Proust's famous and, frankly, massive 4,200-page masterpiece, In Search of Lost Time. Now, if you're like a lot of folks, you probably look at this 7-volume behemoth as this intimidating brick of a book, right? Like something only hardcore literature professors actually dare to tackle. But in this explainer, we're going to flip that perspective completely. We are going to look at Proust's work for what it truly is at its core, an incredibly relatable, brilliant psychological masterclass on memory, love, status, and what it actually takes to build an identity over a lifetime.
So, to keep us from getting lost in the weeds of all those pages, here is a quick roadmap of the narrator's journey. 1. Unlocking the hidden past. 2. The illusion of love. 3. High society and performance. And 4. Time regained through art.
Okay, part 1. Unlocking the hidden past and the psychology of the famous Madeleine. It all kicks off with our adult narrator. He's struggling to figure himself out, trying to grasp the nature of happiness, and he just dips a small Madeleine cake into his tea.
What happens next is wild, because Proust essentially predicts modern cognitive science right here. When he tastes that tea-soaked cake, he isn't just remembering his childhood in Cambrai, he is violently, unexpectedly transported back there. These totally forgotten memories just flood back with staggering vividness. And by doing this, Proust makes a huge, groundbreaking claim for his era. Our emotional lives are actually shaped way before we consciously understand them. Our deepest, most authentic truths are locked away far beneath our conscious awareness, literally just waiting for a random sensory trigger to wake them up.
And that brings us to the absolute foundation of his philosophy, the stark difference between voluntary and involuntary memory. So voluntary memory is deliberate. It's you right now trying to remember what you had for lunch last Tuesday. It's abstract, it's emotionally flat, and it basically reads like a Wikipedia summary of your life. But involuntary memory? That is triggered entirely by a sensory experience, a specific taste, a weird smell, a random sound. It is totally uncontrollable, insanely vivid, and it brings back the actual emotional reality of the past. Proust is arguing that your true identity lives in those sensory impressions, not in your rational, everyday thoughts.
Just to give you a sense of the sheer scale we're dealing with, look at how these 7 volumes map out. They aren't tracking a standard, action-packed plot. Instead, they map out the gradual, incredibly layered education of human consciousness itself. We start in childhood, where memory awakens, move through youth, where desire starts forming, and head straight into society, where all those early illusions inevitably collapse. It's a psychological evolution. It builds meaning gradually, stage by stage, which is exactly how the human mind actually works.
Moving right along to part 2, the illusion of love, imagination versus reality. Let's look at how all this psychology plays out when our narrator starts experiencing romance. And what Proust reveals here is honestly fascinating. Love is very rarely about the other person. Actually, it's mostly a projection of your own mind.
The core takeaway here is that love is anchored in memory, not presence. Imagination will always beat reality. Early on, a sophisticated guy named Swann falls madly in love with a woman named Odette. The crazy part? He doesn't even find her attractive at first. His passion is built entirely through his own imagination over time. Later on, the narrator does the exact same thing with a young woman named Albertine. And Proust captures this deeply modern anxiety so perfectly. We fall in love with our own idealized, polished image of someone. It's an internal loop. Honestly, it's exactly like doom scrolling and excess social media today. You're engaging with a constructed memory, not the real, flawed, living, breathing human being.
So naturally, this illusion inevitably rots into jealousy. And Proust outlines the anatomy of jealousy perfectly. First, you try to isolate your partner. Then you start monitoring their movements, interrogating their past. You do absolutely everything you can to eliminate any uncertainty. But guess what? You just end up suffering this increasing, totally self-generating anxiety. It's a toxic sequence that turns love into a literal mental prison. The narrator actually goes as far as confining Albertine to his home, but ironically, the harder he tries to possess her, the further away she slips. The desperate need for control paradoxically destroys the exact connection he's trying so hard to save.
Which brings us to part 3, high society and performance, the theater of aristocracy. Because, if his romantic life wasn't exhausting enough, let's look at his social life. As he chases this glamorous acceptance into the ultra-elite Guermantes family, he hits another crushing wall of reality.
The second he actually gets into these incredibly prestigious Parisian salons, the magic just evaporates. He realizes high society is basically just a giant, complex theater production. If you break it down, beneath all the fancy clothes and elegant manners, it's mostly mutual illusion, performative identity, hypocrisy, and vanity. There is very little inherent worth there. A modern viewer would instantly recognize this. It's the ultimate imposter syndrome, masked by whatever the shifting fashion or status games of the day happen to be. It is entirely superficial.
The whole social performance operates on a few basic steps. People curate their identities, they copy whoever is above them, and they aggressively hide any private weaknesses. But eventually, the narrator realizes a harsh truth. Social status is never permanent. Families fall from grace, the it girls and fashionable guys are forgotten overnight. Nobility doesn't rely on any lasting truth, it's just a system of mutual illusion. It only survives because everyone agrees to play the game. The second people stop believing in it, the whole thing falls apart.
And that leads us to our final and most crucial section. Part 4, Time Regained Through Art, the Crisis and the Revelation. At this point, the narrator is totally overwhelmed. His romance has failed, his social climbing feels hollow and exhausting, and he is fully convinced he has zero real artistic talent. He hits rock bottom, thinking his entire life has been a colossal waste of time. But then, in the final volume, Time Regained, something incredible happens. He attends a party after being away for years. First, he has this brutal confrontation with aging. He looks around and sees all these vibrant people he used to know, and they're all elderly now. Time has completely ravaged them. But then, the trigger. He hears this incredibly ordinary sound, just the clink of a spoon against the plate, and instantly, bam, he gets hit with a massive rush of involuntary memory, exactly like the Madeleine cake from when he was a kid. This ordinary moment sparks a profound revelation. It proves that his past didn't just disappear. It was always right there inside of him, just waiting to be woken up.
But this massive rush of memory forces him into a really terrifying existential corner. He has to ask himself the central question of his whole life. Was all this time truly lost? Were all those years spent obsessing over toxic romances and chasing fake social clout just a complete and utter waste?
And here is the ultimate plot twist of the entire epic. The answer is no. It wasn't a waste at all. His apparent failures, the deep humiliations, the fleeting little moments of joy, they were actually the necessary raw material for artistic creation. He finally gets it. Life has no inherent meaning until you interpret it. Everyday experience is just messy and chaotic until art gives it shape. Art doesn't magically let you escape time, it reorganizes it. It gives a sense of permanence to things that are otherwise totally fleeting. This realization leads to this incredibly beautiful definition of who we are. Proust completely rejects the idea that you are just one fixed, unchanging person. No way. Identity is accumulated time. The self is layered, it's contradictory, it's constantly being rewritten by our memories, piling up like sediment over the years. He realizes that human life only really makes sense when you look back on it retrospectively. He couldn't possibly understand his life while he was in the middle of living it. And that is exactly why the very end of this massive novel actually reveals the beginning of its own creation. The narrator finally decides to sit down and write the exact book that you have just finished reading.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final lingering thought that really nails Proust's revolutionary thesis. Time destroys everything on the outside, but your memory preserves everything on the inside, and art is the only bridge that can reconcile the two. Think about the sensory memories that trigger your own hidden past, a certain song, the smell of rain, whatever it is for you. Knowing what we now know about the mechanics of memory and imagination, I have to ask, how might you begin to reorganize your own lost time?